Welcome to this deep dive.
Hey there.
Today, we're really digging into something pretty fundamental, something that affects, well, pretty much everyone.
Fear.
Exactly. Overcoming fear, unlocking potential. We've looked at some fascinating sources for this.
Yeah, a real mix research studies, some
Yeah.
powerful insights into what fear actually is and how it works on us.
And our mission today really is to unpack all that.
To understand fear, maybe not as the enemy, but definitely as this complex force.
How it limits us, sometimes in ways we don't even consciously register.
And crucially, what the sources suggest we can actually do about it. Practical ways to move forward with the fear.
Yeah, not necessarily eliminating it, but working with it. And it all seems to pivot around this one question, right? From one of the sources.
Oh yeah, that central question.
What would you do if you weren't afraid?
Such a simple question, but wow.
Right. That's basically our jumping off point for this whole deep dive. So, first things first, let's try and get our heads around what the sources actually say fear is.
Okay, well, the big point they make right away is that it's not like a mistake in our wiring.
Not a flaw.
No, definitely not. It's vital. It's evolutionary.
It's that old alarm system.
Exactly. The fight or flight thing that, kept our ancestors from becoming lunch.
When facing real physical danger, predators, cliffs, that sort of thing.
It's hardwired survival stuff. Deep programming.
And the neuroscience bits in the sources are pretty mind-blowing. They talk about the amygdala.
Yeah, that core fear processor in the brain.
And the speed. One study mentioned activation in, 15 milliseconds?
Something incredibly fast like that. Faster than conscious thought.
Before you even know what you're reacting to, almost.
Which makes perfect sense for survival, right? Split-second reactions were key back then.
But, and this is the crucial turn the sources take,
Right, the modern world.
our main threats aren't usually tigers anymore.
No, now it's mostly psychological stuff. Fear of rejection, fear of failing.
Not being good enough, fear of change, the unknown.
All that. And that's where this powerful ancient system can kind of start messing with us
It stops being just an ally.
and can actually become a saboteur. Yeah. Working against our own goals.
So how does that sabotage actually, show up day to day? The sources say it's often not loud and dramatic.
No, not usually a roar. They talk about it more like whispers.
Whispers.
Yeah, those quiet little thoughts in the back of your head. Better not. What if it goes wrong? You'll look stupid.
That low hum of anxiety rather than outright panic sometimes.
Exactly. And those whispers, according to the material we looked at, they gently push us
Towards playing it safe.
towards making safe choices. Yeah. So you end up building a life that's maybe more about avoiding bad feelings.
Than actually chasing what you genuinely want or aspire to.
And this isn't just theoretical. The sources pulled some pretty stark data.
Like that Harvard Business Review stat.
Yeah. 85% of people apparently hate their jobs but stay. 85%.
Wow, that's huge. And the sources link that directly to fear.
Pretty much. Fear of change, fear of the unknown, financial insecurity fears, all tied in.
And it's not just jobs. There was that other stat about imposter syndrome.
Oh, right. Journal of Behavioral Science.
Right.
70% of people feel it facing new challenges.
70%. That feeling of, I don't belong here, I'm going to be found out.
It's so common.
Yeah.
And the core idea the sources keep coming back to is this.
Fear doesn't stop the dreams themselves.
No, you still have the dreams, the ideas, you see the opportunities, but fear stops the action.
It keeps you stuck.
And it's-
Creates inertia.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if fear creates this inertia, this stuckness, how do you break free?
And that brings us back to that question, doesn't it? The sources frame it as a really potent tool.
What would you do if you weren't afraid?
Yeah.
It's powerful.
And the suggestion is to really sit with it. Not just think about it abstractly, but personally.
Like really ask yourself, okay, what project am I avoiding because I'm scared it won't be perfect?
Or who would I reach out to, maybe reconnect with, if I wasn't worried about being rejected?
What version of me would show up if fear wasn't calling the shots?
And they included that great story about Sarah Blakely, the Spanx founder.
Oh, the failure story. Yeah, that's brilliant.
She built this billion-dollar company, right? And she talks about how her dad actually encouraged failure,
You used to ask them every week at dinner, so what did you fail at this week?
which completely reframes it. Failure isn't the end of the world. It's just data.
It's proof you're trying something, stretching yourself,
Huh.
which, you kind of need to do if you're starting something totally new like Spanx.
That perspective shift seems key.
Absolutely. And it leads to another really important point the sources make. This isn't about becoming fearless.
Right, the goal isn't zero fear.
No, the material draws a distinction. It's not about being fearless, like having no fear at all.
Which probably isn't realistic anyway.
Likely not. It's about being valiant, acting despite the fear.
Ah, okay. Valiant versus fearless. I like that.
It echoes that psychologist Susan Jeffers, her famous line.
Feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yep.
Reference in the sources, yeah.
Exactly that. You don't wait for the fear to magically disappear before you act.
You act while you feel it, with the knot in your stomach, with the uncertainty.
And thinking bigger picture, the sources even suggest fear can be like a compass.
A compass? How so?
Well, if something feels scary, especially those psychological fears around growth or authenticity,
Yeah.
it might actually mean you're heading towards something important, something worthwhile.
So the fear signals you're pushing boundaries, stepping outside the comfort zone.
Pretty much. It means you're entering territory where the real growth happens, where potential gets unlocked.
Okay, so we accept the fears there. We know the key is acting anyway. What tools or strategies do the sources actually give us to help do that?
Well, they offer several practical things. One is just naming it.
Naming the fear.
Yeah, putting words to it. Instead of this big, vague blob of anxiety, actually saying, okay, I'm afraid of X specifically because I think Y might happen.
Just articulating it takes away some of its power.
Seems to. Makes it less abstract, more manageable. Another technique is visualizing the worst case.
Okay, like really imagining the worst possible outcome.
Exactly. Asking, what's the absolute worst that could realistically happen here? And then the important follow-up, could I handle it?
And the sources mentioned data on this, didn't they? That most fears don't happen.
Yeah, something like 90% of the things we actively worry about never actually materialize. So playing out that worst case, could I survive it scenario often shrinks the fear down to size.
Makes sense. And you don't have to start with huge leaps either.
No, definitely not. They
Yeah.
mentioned micro-bravery, I think, drawing on Mel Robbins' concept.
Micro bravery, like small daily acts.
Exactly. Sending one slightly scary email.
Yeah.
Speaking up for 30 seconds in a meeting. Signing up for that course you've been eyeing.
Each small step builds the muscle, right?
Builds that courage muscle, yeah. And of course, leaning on your support network.
Talking it out.
Yeah, with trusted friends, family. Just getting it out there often helps you see it differently, get some relief.
And for the really deep stuff.
The sources definitely point towards professional help therapy. Coaching is a really valuable and honestly brave step for tackling those deeper fears or limiting beliefs.
So think about all this. Let's circle back to that question.
What would you do if you weren't afraid?
Yeah. Imagine that version of yourself. The sources really encourage trying to visualize that. A version that's maybe freer, more aligned with what you actually want.
Someone who operates less from, what if it goes wrong?
And more from, okay, but what if it goes right? That shift.
And the key takeaway is, this isn't just a fantasy.
No, the material really stresses that this version is possible, but it requires the action bit.
The willingness to move, even with the fear.
Right. And it connects to that data, I think, from the University of Scranton.
Oh yeah, about goal achievement.
That huge percentage, like 92%, who set goals but don't achieve them.
But the 8% who do.
The common factor, they act. Even when they don't feel totally ready, totally confident, they just start. It really reminds me of that Nelson Mandela quote, the sources included.
Oh, the one about bravery.
Yeah. It is not the brave man who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear.
And conquering it, based on everything we've discussed from the sources, isn't making it vanish.
It's choosing to act, to speak, to create, even while it's there.
So, yeah, it feels like we've come full circle.
It does. This deep dive, it really shows that understanding fear, seeing how it limits us, sometimes subtly.
And then choosing to move forward despite it.
Yeah.
That seems to be the core path.
The path to unlocking that potential we talked about at the start.
And the sources leave us with a pretty provocative final thought, don't they?
Yeah. That the life you haven't quite let yourself live yet.
It's waiting, just on the other side of fear.
So we really invite you, listening, to think about that. Reflect on what we've covered.
Maybe ask yourself, what's the biggest fear holding you back right now?
And maybe, what's just one small thing you could do today if that fear wasn't quite so loud? Just something to ponder after this deep dive.